Chapter 71, Heart of the Emperor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 071, Heart of the Emperor. Regular chapter. As Princess Ling Meng started describing what happened, His Majesty's face slowly became more serious, a chilling coldness accumulating within his eyes. His Majesty's head was lowered as he listened quietly without making even the slightest movement. This matter involved the safety of His Majesty's own daughter. In addition, it had also dragged in another crucial person. This person had often remained indifferent to political affairs, but his influence and the consequences that would result from his actions were simply too huge, so much so that the emperor himself may not be able to bear it. It could even be said that the emperor was unwilling to face it. As an emperor, at a time when His Majesty's own daughter had suffered from an assassination attempt, His Majesty would instead have to be concerned about a playboy debauchee. Could there be no love amongst the royal bloodlines? How sorrowful. Finally. According to your story, June Moxie had went to deliver a warning to you before the assassination attempt occurred. The emperor pondered. Yes. Although I cannot be certain, I believe that there should not be any suspicions regarding June Moxie's movements. Maybe he found some clues regarding this incident, Princess Ling Meng firmly said in a low tone. Clues? Considering June Moxie's worthless character, how could he have any ability to find any clues? Never mind, these are all minor details now. At any rate, another master appeared and saved June Moxie before taking him away. In other words, June Moxie did not die, correct? The emperor's eyes turned mysteriously profound. That is so, Imperial Father. Princess Ling Meng knew that His Majesty had purposely avoided speaking about Yi Guhan even though he knew of his existence. She herself chose not to mention his name. If that is the case, then why is Jun Zhantian losing his mind? He even chose to disregard the consequences of drumming the general's summoning drum. The emperor pondered about it. His grandson is still alive and the Jun family had yet to fall to the point of having no descendants. Why then would he act this way? This action of his is simply. His Majesty stood up and slowly stepped forward 2 paces, his fingers gently tapping on his forehead. His Majesty slowly continued. His grandson is not dead, but Jun Zhantian inexplicably went mad, One thing is clear, June Moxie has yet to reach home. I believe that Jun Zhantian must have received news that his grandson was in danger, but after June Moxie did not return for so long, he became mad. It seems I have underestimated them. This stone. How many birds will it hit? His Majesty gave a cold smile. Princess Ling Meng suddenly remembered something, her beautiful face turning pale. If it was truly as she had imagined, then the consequences resulting from this misunderstanding would be something beyond her ability to bear. Since June Moxie's life was no longer in danger back then, why did you not send a message to the June family? Menger, you were too careless this time. Menger, did you remember something else? Seeing Princess Ling Meng's face turning pale, the emperor smiled as he tried to suppress his anger. However, his eyebrows and eyes have already started showing some signs of his fury. His daughter had always maintained herself in both manner and conduct, why would she suddenly make this mistake today? Could it be that the assassination attempt had shaken her heart that badly? Imperial Father, before June Moxie's corpse was found. I meant during the time when we were unable to find his body, I had sent someone to inform the matter to Senior Duke Jun. It was only after the messenger had left that the old man appeared and carried away the injured June Moxie. Princess Ling Meng stammered in an awkward manner, seemingly having difficulty speaking. And then? The message has been sent. But since June Moxie was found to be alive, did you not take any steps to remedy the situation? The emperor looked at his daughter with a look of disappointment. At the same time, his heart was shaken. Old man. Could it be that there are others protecting my daughter besides that Yi Guhan? If that is the case. His Majesty, the emperor contemplated about it, his face remained passive. Considering how much impact this news has, steps must naturally be taken to rectify this misinformation. However, all my bodyguards were injured back then. Thus, I had entrusted this matter to Morong Chien Jun to send a message to Senior Duke Jun to inform him that Jun Moxie is still alive. If the Senior Duke have yet to receive the news that Jun Moxie is still alive, then the only possibility. That is not a possibility, but clearly, Morong Chien Jun did not send any messenger to report this matter to the Jun family. Otherwise, this would not. His Majesty let out a sigh. Traces of savagery suddenly appeared on his clear face before disappearing instantly. I have no more questions, you should go take some rest. After saying that, he stroked Ling Meng's hair. A pair of empty eyes gazed over the imperial palace. His Majesty suddenly felt that this bright yellow color that represented nobility was an eyesore and discomforting for the heart. This time's assassination attempt was strange, hee. How unexpected. His Majesty slowly deliberated, his eyes suddenly turning sharp. I suppose the time has come to wash the palace. I wonder, after using human blood to wash it, will it become even brighter? In the distance, the pounding sound of the drums of war went silent. The entire world was flooded by a suffocating sense of foreboding. Jun Zhantian, I hope that you do not make things too difficult for me. A complicated expression flickered across the emperor's eyes and disappeared almost instantly. Watching the back of his departing daughter, his Majesty crossed his arms and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he spoke. Shadow, go and have a look. Do not interfere unless it is necessary and tell Jun Zhantian that his grandson is still alive. If he wants to throw a fit, that is fine, but he must not cross the line. While you are at it, help me pass something to him. Things have been too peaceful since this old soldier was holding it in all these years. After saying that, His Majesty picked up a writing instrument and wrote a few words. Rolling up the note, he turned around and said, Go. A gust of wind blew and a figure, which seemed imaginary, floated out into existence. In just a moment, the slip of paper that the emperor was holding had disappeared while a faint shadow could be glimpsed shooting out of the imperial palace. I will allow you to be presumptuous. However, in return, I will be borrowing your sword. The emperor whispered softly, a meaningful smile spreading out upon His Majesty's face. The emperor had always been thorough in his plans. However, he had underestimated the extent of Jun Zhantian's fury. In addition, this message of his was somewhat late. Men, send in the great general Dugu Wudi, the emperor sighed loudly. For now, I will let things remain in a state of chaos. Hopefully, there will be those who understand and choose to restrain themselves. As for those who cannot understand, then there would be no reason to keep them. Rather, they have no qualifications to be kept. It is not that your father is not allowing you to duke it out. Rather, only those that could emerge victorious could be considered a capable person. However, you must toe the line. Those that cross this line will be inviting a calamity upon themselves. After Princess Ling Meng left the emperor, she returned to her own bedchambers. It was only then did she realize that the only things that her imperial father had questioned were all regarding the Jun family. All of them were questions pertaining to Jun Moxie. Instead, not a single question was spared for His Majesty's own beloved daughter who had been the main target of the assassination attempt. Why? This assassination attempt had simply too many suspicions within it. This assassination attempt had involved herself, an imperial princess, and was possibly a sinister product of the other princes. Could it be that in imperial father's heart, this attempt was no less important than the Jun family? Ednel.co Otherwise, was imperial father avoiding something? Or, recalling the mysterious look in her imperial father's eyes, Princess Ling Meng could not help but tremble for a moment. Thankfully, Uncle Yi and that mysterious expert are protecting me. As she was feeling distressed, Princess Ling Meng reached into her bosom and retrieved the 3 small and exquisite flying daggers. Handling it with her hands, she observed that the flying daggers are only as big as her palms, they are slightly curved in a beautiful manner and as thin as a layer of onion. Even when all three were stacked together, their added thickness remained thin. Princess Ling Meng felt curious. How could this little flying dagger radiate such a powerful presence, to the extent of forcing a group of murderous assassins to retreat without a fight? The flying dagger laid in silence, its body reflecting the light of her lamp, emitting a crystalline radiance, colorful and dazzling to the extreme. If one were to see such a flying dagger, they would naturally assume that this was a toy belonging to one of the kids hailing from rich families. Who could have imagined that this was a weapon used by an absolute master? However, I would definitely recognize this unique flying dagger if it should appear before me again. Princess Ling Meng thought happily to herself, her heart filled with a sense of longing. This absolute master is one that even Uncle Yi respects. What kind of person could he be? Chapter 72, Dugu Family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 072 Dugu Family Regular Chapter The great General Dugu Wudi headed back home, his heart feeling suffocated and his mind confused. When Dugu Wudi, who was at the military barracks outside the city, heard the sound of the war drums, he quickly brought a group of soldiers with him and rode towards the city. The first thing he did after entering the city was to go to the imperial palace and request an audience with the emperor. He had already issued the command for his soldiers to make preparations for war. If Jun Zhantian were to rebel, then his Dugu family's military forces would be the only one in the city capable of protecting the emperor. They were also the only ones capable of going against Jun Zhantian's forces. However, His Majesty had maintained his normal, secretive attitude regarding this matter. This caused Dugu Wudi to become perplexed. The current situation had escalated into a very serious level. A drastic change may happen to Tianxiang Kingdom's ruling power at any moment, the imperial palace itself may end up being occupied. But His Majesty only said 4 words to him. Do not be impatient. After which, His Majesty sent him home to find his old man. His Majesty did not allow him to return to his barracks and even obstructed his attempt to organize the defenses for the imperial palace. All of these events were simply too inconceivable. Dugu Wudi felt himself going dizzy. A dispirited Dugu Wudi finally reached his home. Before returning to his own courtyard, he immediately went to find his father, Dugu Zonghan. The end result, however, left this great general in command of hundreds of thousands of soldiers extremely embarrassed. UPIG. Damaged goods. You dragged this senior out from my bed all for the sake of this little problem. You unfilial son. Disobedient animal. How could I have brought up such a worthless thing like you? Next time you leave the house, don't you dare claim that you are my son. I cannot afford to lose so much face. Grandfather Dugu was extremely furious, his voice rose to the point where everyone in the residence could hear him. His spittle was sprayed all over his son's face while his finger harshly nudged Dugu Wudi's head, each nudge pushing his head backwards. Can't you use that pig head of yours to think? Or is it filled with dog poop? Rebel. Your mother's fart. Let this senior enlighten you. Even if our Dugu family were to rebel, Jun Zhantian would never rebel. Even if the emperor himself wants to rebel against himself, Jun Zhantian would also never rebel. Get your sorry ass back to bed and sleep. I don't even have the strength to deal with you anymore, you downright pig. Idiotic pig. Son of a bitch. In the end, the great General Dugu Wudi was kicked out. Grandfather Dugu angrily turned around and went back to bed, but a fierce voice instantly spoke out. You old thing. What did you say just now? Son of a bitch. Who is Wudi's mother? If Wudi is a pig, then what kind of animal are you? Is there nothing in your head but dog poop? You pig. You utter, downright pig. Following that, the sound of several forceful slaps could be heard. The great General Dugu Wudi massaged his buttocks, his face filled with resentment. He shouted inwardly. Give him a vicious beating. Serves him right. Still feeling confused, Dugu Wudi returned to his own courtyard only to find it filled with noise and brightly lit. His wife and his third lesser concubine were still awake. Seeing him return, they quickly went up to him. After asking about it, he was informed that his daughter had ran back home while crying, her tears gushing down like a waterfall, and no amount of cheering her up was effective. After that, she locked herself up in her room, not stepping out at all until now. From the looks of it, someone must have bullied her. Dugu Wudi, who was feeling highly dispirited, suddenly turned furious. Why is everything going awry today? In addition, who in Tianxiang City could have the guts to bully my baby girl? Watch as I mobilize my army to exterminate you. Accompanied by his wives, he broke into his daughter's room and started to coax her. After coaxing her for a long time, she finally stopped crying. After drinking a bowl of soup, she finally calmed down. Who exactly was it that dared to bully my daughter? Tell me their names. This senior will wipe them all out. A ferocious expression could be seen on Dugu Wudi's face. Watching his dear daughter cry to the point where her eyes had become swollen, he could not help but feel his heart aching. A sound roared within him. I want to vent this fury. Father, Dugu Xiaoyi stared at her father and continued. You must help get justice for me. Dugu Wudi was suddenly beset by a sense of foreboding. Could it be that my daughter was? He could not help but become nervous. Who is it? Who else if not that stinking brat, June Moxie from the June family? Today, he provoked me to the point of death. Father, you must help me exact justice. Dugu Xiaoyi pouted and said in an aggrieved manner. Holding it in for a whole day, Dugu Xiaoyi had been waiting for her father to come back so that she could complain to him. After that, she would ask her father to bring her brothers together to beat up June Moxie and take back the meteoric iron while they were at it. She knew that asking these of her mother was pointless, as her mother would not agree. Thus, she did not. After hearing Dugu Xiaoyi's words, Dugu Wudi gave out a sigh of relief. It turned out that I was worried for nothing. I feel much better knowing that did not happen. After that, he frowned and said. My good daughter. If it was someone else, this senior would have no fear at all. Even if it were one of the princes, I would still go catch him and give him a beating for your sake. But if it is June Moxie, that would be rather difficult considering the current situation. Of course it would be difficult. As of right now, not even June Zhantian could tell the whereabouts of his grandson. How could Dugu Wudi locate him? Even if he successfully managed to locate him, he may not have the courage to lay his hands on him. That old thing had thoroughly lost it this time. Could it be that father is afraid of the Junes? My life is so bitter. Arg, I am so angry I could die. Dugu Xiaoyi started crying again. She turned her body and turned her face the other way. For some unknown reason, whenever she recalled June Moxie's face, she felt an urge to beat him up. An inexplicable fury would rise up from within her heart, giving birth to the desire to beat away that detestable smile off his face. Sigh. That is not the case. Watching his daughter cry out again, Dugu Wudi felt helpless and quickly tried to explain. The truth is, this brat. Sigh, we do not even know if he is still alive or not. We cannot even find him. Let's wait until he is found before we proceed. Later on, father will definitely help my dear daughter get her revenge. We will take good care of that brat. You do not know whether he is alive or not. What happened to him? For some unknown reason, Dugu Xiaoyi felt a stabbing pain in her heart. She turned around, her wide-open tear-filled eyes gazed at her father. At the same time, a sense of fear welled up within her. What am I feeling fearful for? I heard that Princess Ling Meng had suffered from an assassination attempt tonight. That bastard who does not know his own limits tried to send a message to the princess. In the end, the princess was saved, but that debauchee ended up becoming the scapegoat. Dugu Wudi's face was a mask of exultation. He did not take note of the pale face on his daughter's face after she heard his words, her small hands clutched tightly together. Dugu Wudi continued. His chest was stabbed once. After that, a silver Xian assassin kicked his chest several times. In the end, someone took him away. As of now, we do not even know where he is. The way I see it, that brat's life is hanging by a thread. Dugu Xiaoyi gave a light moan as she became petrified. She suddenly felt as though her heart had turned into a void of nothingness. Her mind became a complete mess, not a single word from Dugu Wudi's mouth registered within her mind. Even his voice had seemingly become distant and unclear. There is no need to worry. If that brat is still alive, father will catch him and bring him here for you to personally beat his buttocks. Beat it till it is broken, ha ha ha. Dugu Wudi laughed happily. It was then that he realized something was wrong with his daughter's expression. He extended his hands before her and waved about. Xiaoyi. Xiaoyi. Ah. Oh. Dugu Xiaoyi became startled, as though she had just been awakened from her dream. Her face became calm as she slowly lied down upon her bed. Father, I feel tired. I want to sleep. Very well, have a good sleep. Once you wake up, everything would be all right. Father needs to go drink some wine to wash off this unpleasant feeling. Today has been a very bad day. Dugu Wudi shook his head and exited, absolutely oblivious to the fact that something was very wrong with his daughter. Dugu Xiaoyi pulled up her blanket, keeping her entire body concealed beneath it as she lay motionless. Her mother and some of her concerned aunts softly spoke a few words to her. However, Dugu Xiaoyi was not able to hear what they said at all. Her heart was in a state of chaos. She could not understand what was going through her mind, nor could she understand the reason for her inexplicable desire to cry. Her nose felt sour and her heart was throbbing irregularly. Tears flowed out silently from her eyes until the bed covers turned wet. She did not even realize when her mother and aunts left the room. Could he actually be dead? But I have yet to. Chapter 73, Massacre in All Directions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 073, Massacre in All Directions. Regular chapter. Jun Zhantian's face was set with iron-like resolution, his entire being radiating killing intent. He left the military stage and went to his horse. There were a few places that he intended to personally see through. He must personally see it burn to ashes, only then could he comfort his grandson's soul in heaven. Suddenly, a part of the dark night seemingly moved, and a figure that appeared to be even darker than the night appeared mysteriously. Even though this person was standing before them, everyone was unable to discern the features on his face. Shadow. Why are you here? Did His Majesty send you? Jun Zhantian turned and asked. This is a present from His Majesty. Shadow raised his hand and a piece of white paper floated towards Jun Zhantian's hand. A smile seemed to appear on his blurry-looking face and he spoke out in a peculiar and terrifying voice. The voice transformed into an invisible thread, which then entered Jun Zhantian's ears. His Majesty said that your grandson should still be alive. His Majesty also told me to give you this word. Moderation. His voice placed a certain emphasis on the word moderation. His voice was dry and seemingly laced with a sense of unwillingness, as though he was not accustomed to talking this much. Moxie is alive. Jun Zhantian became ecstatic as he suddenly recalled that person he entrusted Moxie with. Could it be that he was the one who had saved my grandson? Jun Zhantian stepped forward and asked anxiously. Shadow, how is my grandson's injury? Shadow had already turned around and was about to leave, seemingly unwilling to stay. Even if the person before him is the most powerful general within the military forces, he had no interest in staying. However, after hearing Jun Zhantian's question, he reluctantly answered. Still alive, heavily injured. After saying that, he shook his head. He then stopped to gaze at Jun Wui, who was beside Jun Zhantian. Giving out a "hein," he then disappeared without a trace. The spark of hope that had ignited within Jun Zhantian was suddenly extinguished by a pot of cold water. Jun Zhantian felt himself shocked senseless. The gaze that Shadow had used when looking at Jun Wui had seemed as though he was trying to send a message. Even though Jun Moxie would not die from his injuries, his condition would not be any better than Jun Wui. Jun Zhantian's heart, which had been rendered lifeless, had just turned warm, but was now frozen solid. Could it be that the only heir of my Jun family would end up being a cripple? With these thoughts swirling within his mind, Grandpa Jun's heart exploded with raging fury. If he was not mistaken, the ones who would always go against his grandson back then were the Meng families. Screw your granny. I do not care if today's matter have anything to do with you people, I will just throw all of you onto the chopping board. Consider this your unlucky day. Jun Zhantian cursed loudly within his heart. He jumped up his horse, gritted his teeth and shouted. Soldiers, follow me. We are going on a raid. The reason Shadow glanced at Jun Wui was not for the sake of giving Grandpa Jun any message. He simply had a different reason. This night was destined to become a bloody one. Jun Zhantian's sky-piercing rage would encase the entirety of the capital city in a rain of blood. Within the capital city, warhorses galloped back and forth. One after another, the residences of many high-ranking officials were set on fire. The sounds of weapons clashing, miserable screams filled the air. Before Shadow had appeared, countless men in black had started moving about in the darkness. Like ghosts, they infiltrated the residences of court officials one after another. Some of the residences had no opportunity to resist at all and the officials fell before their swords, blood splattering all over. Two assistant ministers of justice, Meng Jiu and Li Qiao, are both members of the Meng and Li factions respectively. They are also supporters of the eldest prince. They were usually very unfriendly towards the Jun family. However, tonight, their two families had to suffer greatly. As the war drums were still resounding, several men in black leaped into the residences of these two court officials. Beginning with the gatekeepers, these men left a trail of blood as they made their way into the main hall before breaking into their targets' bedrooms. The two pitiful court officials did not even get the chance to say a word before having their heads lopped off. Thankfully, their family members were spared. Soon after, their residences were set on fire, their flames burning brilliantly in the night. One of the current imperial censor, Tai Yan, had always been at odds with Jun Zhantian. His son had followed Jun Zhantian to war but ended up breaking military laws and was beheaded. This incident caused him to become outraged for years. Hearing the sound of the war drums, he thought that he finally had the chance at striking down Jun Zhantian. Quickly getting out of bed, he got dressed and started working on an impeachment petition. Halfway through, his window was suddenly broken as several masked men in black charged in like ghosts. They snatched up the unfinished impeachment petition, glanced through it and sneered. Rolling up the petition, they brutally forced it down this old man's throat before cutting off his neck, the petition also cut in half in the process. Another imperial censor, Zhou Mengqing, had come forth after Jun Wui lost the war and ended up becoming a cripple. Back then, he had charged Jun Wui with the accusation of being an inept commander, leading to Jun Wui's dismissal from military duties. Tonight, he had drunk some wine and was sleeping together with one of his concubines. Unexpectedly, he would end up being snatched up in his birthday suit. Next, his prized possession between his two legs was cut off before being stabbed in the heart. After which he was hung naked from one of the great trees within his residence. His eyes, which had remained open unto death, stared silently at the flames devouring his residence. Another two families which had once been part of the Jun family's faction but had turned coat and joined the second prince's faction felt a sense of foreboding after hearing the sound of the general's summoning drum. Qian Wanguan and Wu Yun, these two men were well aware of how Grandpa June usually acts. Even though their residences were slightly far from the city gates, they made a wise decision. Leave the city immediately. They quickly tidied up some of their belongings and proceeded towards the city gates, planning to escape in the middle of the night and lay low. However, when they arrived at the city gates, they found themselves surrounded by an army. The officer leading the soldiers shouted out orders to catch assassins, signaling for the archers to let loose their barrage. He did not give anyone the chance to explain themselves. At the south gate, over 100 members of the Qian family were transformed into porcupines, their faces becoming unrecognizable. At the west gate, the nearly 60 members of the Wu family were all killed, their corpses rendered into a bloody pulp. After which, their bodies were doused with oil and burned. The stench of burning corpses immediately rose up to the 9 heavens. Beside the corpses of the two families, 2 tall wooden signs were constructed. Assassin's Retribution. An unfortunate imperial censor had woken up in the middle of the night and entered the toilet. The next day, he was found with his bare buttocks hanging in the air, his head shoved deep into the excrement pit. One could only guess how long he had to suffocate before dying. These officials who held high positions had at this moment in time turned into a flock of lambs surrounded by a horde of ravenous wolves. On this night, it seemed as though the end of days had descended upon the entire capital. The raging flames of Grandpa June's fury completely engulfed the capital. The extent of what transpired had gone beyond what His Majesty expected. When His Majesty received the report, he immediately became furious to the point of smashing anything he could lay his hands upon. The June family's secret forces rampaged about just like a pack of bloodthirsty ghosts. Under the chaotic night and the unbelievable amount of bloodshed and death, the show of force from the June family's secret forces had shaken the prominent members of the capital city. Many of them were badly hurt while even more were shaking in fear. Every one of them shared one line of thought. Against such an unstoppable force, what can they do? Perhaps they should consider organizing a new group of defenders for their homes. This was especially true for the 3 princes. Each of them had summoned their allies and called for an emergency meeting. The massive power held by the June family had caused the 3 princes' eyes to turn blood red. If only they were able to grasp such a kind of power. However, in the midst of their discussions, their residential palace suddenly caught on fire. Following that, countless number of decapitated heads were thrown inside, their blood staining the grounds. The 3 princes were scared out of their wits and immediately ordered their palace guards to search around. However, nothing was found. In addition, when they tried to search outside, they were forced to return by the patrolling soldiers. Naturally, there were exceptions amongst the many big families. For example, the Li family, Meng family and Song family. Their foundations were deep and strong. When the masked men in black started their attacks, their family's experts quickly reacted to stop their attacks. However, the fire attacks on their family continued. In the Li family's secret chamber, there were several people who had wanted to head out after hearing the cries of battle occurring on the outside. One of them was dressed in white robes and over 30 years in age. His face was cold and prideful. Just by looking at his bearing and manner, one would be able to deduce that he was the Sky Xian expert who had killed off Qin Hu in front of old Master Tang Wanli. The door of the chamber opened and the young Master Li Yuran walked in. "Yuran, let me go out." Among these men, the strongest should only be at around the Jade Xian level of cultivation. What is there to fear? Any one of us here is enough to put a stop to them. I really cannot understand. These men's attacks have reached your own doorstep, and yet you choose to remain indifferent about it. Since these men have a death wish, then we might as well help them fulfill it. The white-robed man frowned, his face expressing indignation. He had always been a proud and arrogant person. Since when did he become a coward that needed to hide away in a secret place? Chapter 74, This is my explanation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 074, This is my explanation. Sponsored Chapter. Sponsored by Anonymous Anonymous. A big thank you to the sponsors. Thank you. No. Absolutely not. At this moment, Li Yuran had actually let out a calm smile. I would rather have the Li residence burnt to the ground than mobilize you. His smile contained a peculiar mix of tenderness and chilling ruthlessness. As long as our people still lives, the Li family will also remain. But if you were to show yourself, what the masked men in black does no longer matter. One thing I can be certain of, we will end up attracting the attention of countless eyes. Once your identities are exposed, or even if your identities do not become exposed, the Li family would end up in hot soup. In addition, the rumors that the Xian court is in the hands of the Li family would spread out in all directions. When that happens, senior brother, please remain in this secret chamber for now and not come out. Once this matter settles, I will immediately arrange for someone to send you out of the city. If there are any other matters that require your help, I will immediately notify master and fellow seniors. Li Yuran laughed lightly. This time, not only am I not going to stop him, I will even send some more people for him to kill. I am curious to see what would happen to this old duke in the end. His heinous actions are no different from the crime of rebellion. Even if the royal court is somehow willing to overlook it, would the emperor tolerate it? A rare sneer appeared on Li Yuran's face. Very well. If that is the case, I won't say anything else. I will follow your wishes. The white-robed man's face expressed dissatisfaction, but he nodded helplessly. Junior brother, if you have the time for it, you should go visit master. Master has been worried about you. Senior brother can be assured, I will definitely do so. Li Yuran smiled faintly and walked out. Just then, an aerial signaling firework exploded in the skies with a boom sound. Its explosion created an array of colors in the sky, beautiful to the extreme. After the firework was set off, all the masked men in black retreated immediately, just like the receding tide. They disengaged from their battles and retreated, some leaping across the walls while others rushed out through the doors. Within the matter of a few blinks, they have all disappeared into the vast expanse of the night. Soon, the thunderous sounds of hooves resounded as thousands of cavalry reacted. In an orderly manner, the cavalry units of the military rode towards the Li residence at best speed. In just moments, they had all arrived before the door of the Grand Preceptor Li's residence. A series of commands rang out and the mounted soldiers urged their horses to move, surrounding the Li residence. The main gate was smashed open with a boom, and Grandpa Jun Zhantian stepped inside, his body exuding killing intent. His body was covered with a sky-blue glow, a result of channeling the sky Xian Qi within his body. Although it was likely that the Li family would not dare to do anything against him due to his identity, he must place considerations on what-ifs. After all, it is better to be safe than sorry. On either side, two teams of elite soldiers entered the area in 2 rows, their swords flashing. All members of the Li family, get out here. Assassins have appeared within the city and I am now conducting a search on the entire city. Grandpa Jun roared loudly, his voice shaking the entire residence. It turned out that old brother Jun had personally come. You honor my humble abode with your presence. The Grand Preceptor Li Shang's face was all smiles as he stepped out from the main hall. Step by step, he showed the eager demeanor of someone who had just been reunited with a long-lost twin brother. Jun Zhantian's face remained passive. Grand Preceptor Li, please keep your underlings and relatives in check. Princess Ling Meng had just suffered from an assassination attempt. Thus, I am now performing my duties in searching and capturing the assassins. If anyone here gets injured due to interfering with my military duties, I will not be responsible. After saying that, he waved his hand. Search. Hold. Li Shang stepped forward, his white beard flowing lightly. The gentle look on his face flickered momentarily before he said in a loud voice. Senior Duke Jun, you are the Grand Marshal of the kingdom's military forces, a duke of the kingdom, a person of great authority in weight in the royal court. However, I am the Grand Preceptor, another person of great authority in the court, and also a duke. Without His Majesty's decree, who would dare to be presumptuous within my Li residence? Jun Zhantian sneered, his eyes revealing traces of emotions. Grand Preceptor, are you trying to imply that any high-ranking official within the royal court have the right to harbor assassins within their homes? Go search. Anyone who dares obstruct, kill them without mercy. Suddenly, hundreds of soldiers marched in from behind, heading towards the Li residence's inner areas with the intention of searching. Li Shan's body trembled in anger and he shouted. Jun Zhantian, you are acting brazenly, overstepping the bounds of your office. Are you planning to rebel? Jun Zhantian laughed out loudly. Grand Preceptor sure knows how to joke. This senior official is simply trying to root out the assassins who tried to assassinate the imperial princess. How is this action of mine overstepping the bounds of my office? How could this be considered brazen? How am I planning to rebel? Grand Preceptor, you have been trying to stop me from searching your residence for quite a while now. Could it be that there is a connection between you and the assassins? After saying that, Grandpa Jun ignored him and waved his hand, signaling for the soldiers to speed up their searching speed. It was at this moment that a white-robed youngster stepped forth. It was none other than Li Yuran. He gave a ceremonious salute of respect to Jun Zhantian before speaking up. Since Senior Duke Jun wishes to conduct a search, our Li family's underlings would certainly not oppose you. However, without His Majesty's decree, Senior Duke Jun's action today would be tantamount to a wanton act of trespassing into the home of a high-ranked court official. Even if Senior Duke Jun is not fearful of the consequences, our Li family still needs to uphold some of our reputation. If this matter were to be spread out, then both our reputation would end up being smeared. Jun Zhantian coldly stared at the refined-looking youngster standing before him. He could not help but recall his grandson, Moxie. His grandson could have ended up being even more powerful than Li Yuran, but had ended up suffering from a sinister attack. When he thought about that, his fury burst out and he coldly asked. What are you suggesting? This junior only have a simple question to ask of Senior Duke Jun. Senior Duke Jun keeps reiterating that you wanted to conduct a search of my family's residence to find assassins. It does not matter from where or how Senior Duke received the information that our Li family is harboring assassins. However, what will Senior Duke do if you are unable to find the assassins within my family's residence? Li Yuran gently smiled and took another step forward. Should that happen, Senior Duke Jun will have to give our Li family an explanation. Grandpa Jun laughed out loudly. Suddenly, he took a step forward and threw out a vicious slap at Li Yuran's face. A "pa" sound rang out, followed by a kick from Grandpa Jun directed at Li Yuran's stomach. After kicking Li Yuran to the ground, Grandpa Jun spoke out in anger. This senior is in the process of searching for assassins. Not even your grandfather dared to fart in front of me, but you. What are you? You dare come out to start a debate and find faults with this senior. You want an explanation. This is my explanation. Pooh. Jun Zhantian spat out. What a joke. If we could not find the assassins, that would naturally mean that your Li family is innocent. If we cannot capture the assassins, then we will obviously have to continue searching. What else is there? I am more interested in asking you this. Your Li family, from the seniors down to the juniors, have been desperately trying to stop me from conducting a search for the assassins. What are you planning? Could it be that your Li family is planning to rebel? Are you the mastermind behind the imperial princess assassination attempt? If the assassins were to successfully escape due to your actions of delaying my duties, do your Li family have enough heads to bear this responsibility? These words were directed at Li Shan. Clearly, Grandpa Jun did not view Li Yuran as someone with the qualifications to even talk to him. Even in a confrontation between military forces, rank must be considered. If a bunch of rookie soldiers with no qualification were to be sent to the battlefield, they would only end up being suppressed and massacred. Naturally, Li Yuran understood this logic. However, he could not stand the sight of his grandfather being humiliated so. In addition, there were indeed some people that must not be found staying inside their hidden chambers. If those people were to be found, that would be akin to having yellow mud smeared onto their underwear. Even if it is not poop, everyone will still think it is poop. Even if the Li family is not guilty, everyone will still think the Li family is guilty. Left with no choice, he had to step forward and hope that Jun Zhantian would consider his status as the #1 person within the military forces and let this go. How could he have guessed that the current Jun Zhantian no longer cared about his status or reputation? A slap and a kick, executed in a flash. Li Yuran may be a genius, but his experience is limited. His current level of cultivation is only at the gold xian, a difference of heaven and earth compared to Grandpa Jun's sky xian. In addition, he was caught off guard, and thus had to endure a slap to the face and a kick to his stomach. All he could feel was his mind ringing and stars spinning before his eyes. Even though Grandpa Jun did not utilize any xian qi in his attacks, they were both done before the eyes of thousands. For Li Yuran, this slap of his was akin to a strike to his heart. Chapter 75, Search Viciously. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 075, Search Viciously. Sponsored chapter. Sponsored by Anonymous Sud K, Dubai. Special thanks to the sponsors for the support. Li Yuran silently got up and straightened himself, a ruthless coldness flashed across his eyes before disappearing. He maintained his courteous attitude and said with a humble smile, "Senior Duke's teachings are true. Please forgive this junior's offense." He said those words with a smile. Looking at Jun Zhantian, his face expressed a smile of sincerity which was able to even portray him feeling a deep sense of shame. It seemed that he was truly embarrassed by the words that he had just spoken earlier. Jun Zhantian's eyes widened as he suddenly felt an invisible pressure. Judging by his calm demeanor, this brat is no ordinary individual. He is likely the ruthless type that could toy with people to their deaths. Jun Zhantian sighed inwardly. If Moxie remains healthy, this brat would become his biggest rival amongst the younger generations. He coldly turned around and scoffed. The Li family line is indeed all of the sinister asterisk type. Grand Preceptor Li Shang's beard trembled. Jun Zhantian's words was the equivalent of cursing all their ancestors of the Li family. Everyone move out of the way and let him search. Old bag Jun. If you cannot find the assassins, this senior will have a good discussion with you before His Majesty tomorrow. When that happens, I will see if you can still maintain this toughness. Li Shang coldly waved his hand, turned around and stormed out towards a flower tree. He sat down below the tree and closed his eyes, not making any more movements. Jun Zhantian waved his hand again. Search in detail. Do not miss out a single spot and do not leave a single stone unturned. Nearly 1,000 soldiers behind him shouted their affirmation in unison and fiercely rushed inside. Instantly, the entirety of the Li family was turned upside down to the point of having chickens fly and dogs jump. On a spot situated some distance away from the Li residence was a normal-looking sedan chair. 4 figures stood around the sedan chair, their faces were filled with indifference. The curtains of the sedan chair were lifted to reveal a profound set of eyes observing the situation in the Li residence. The person's ears were focused on listening in on the conversations within. This person possesses a clear face which is somewhat squarish. However, both his eyebrows are slanted upwards, just like a pair of dragons soaring to the heavens. Even without moving or saying anything, he exuded a prestigious awe-inspiring aura. After listening for a bit, this person closed his eyes and murmured. The amount of stubbornness shown by Jun Zhantian against the Li family this time is indeed a little overboard. It is only natural for the Li family to have many secrets pertaining to the protection of their family that would prove dangerous if revealed. If these secrets were to be exposed, the Li family would disappear. Jun Zhantian would not let them off easily, but the kingdom still have need of the Li family. The person frowned, seemingly having a headache. Shadow, if anything unexpected were to happen, you will need to step forward to solve it. Not a single sound could be heard outside, but this person knew that his command has been received. He then closed his eyes, his fingers tapping a tea table made of jade. Both his eyebrows moved, seemingly coming closer and intertwined with one another. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. This grandson of Li Shang is not just a talent, he is a very dangerous talent. Jun Zhantian soldiers searched all the way as they moved, turning over containers and toppling cabinets, causing things to fall and crash. It seemed as though these men were not trying to look for assassins, but were here purely to carry out acts of destructions. Ping! A huge vase was thrown out and shattered into pieces. The Grand Preceptor Li Shang's face twitched violently for a moment. The number of those vases is only. Ping! Ping! Grandpa Jun glanced around with a cold countenance as he held on to his horsewhip. Inhaling deeply, he shouted. I want you to search viciously. Even though the atmosphere was very solemn, those standing behind him all turned their heads and secretly laughed. The act of searching. Could the word viciously be used for such an act? The senior Duke Jun's use of words was apparently quite unprofessional. The word vicious should be used for crush. Crush everything viciously. This old thing can be quite funny. It almost seemed as though he is afraid that people would not know that he is simply trying to create havoc. Let us observe for a little longer. The man in the sedan chair could not help but let out a smile. Hearing the word viciously, the soldiers proceeded to search with even more force. Nearly 2,000 soldiers poured into the Li residence, acting as though they had just broken through into the enemy fortress. Anything that can be thrown was thrown, anything that can be destroyed was destroyed. Every member of the Li family stared at this spectacle from the courtyard, blood dripping out from their hearts. All that is money, ah. After a moment, the man within the sedan chair closed his eyes slightly and whispered. There shouldn't be any problem here, let's go back. He closed the curtains and leaned upon the soft seat, before closing his eyes. The old Jun Zhantian had already understood his intentions and had only destroyed the things that were placed conspicuously. As for the secret areas in the Li residence, he had chosen to avoid it. It seemed that there would not be any problems here. I would like to see if any family would still dare to pick sides again after this round of chaos. The man within the sedan chair smiled. Even if you want to fight, you must fight within certain limits. Once your actions endanger the safety of the kingdom, then what happened today would be a warning. The sedan chair left quietly without a trace. Jun Zhantian continued standing still, but Jun Wui turned his head to look for a moment after the sedan chair had left. Reporting to Grand Marshal, no trace of the assassin was found. One by one, the soldiers came forth to give their report, each of them stating that the assassins were not found. Jun Zhantian turned furious and shouted. Are you trying to say that the assassins have flown off to the skies? Humph. They are not in the Li residence. Then we will go to another residence to search. Leading the soldiers, he strode out of the main gate, jumped up his horse and rode forward. The direction he took was the one leading towards the Meng family. The members of the Li family stared at their compound, which had been turned into a beggar's living area, tears flowing down their eyes. The Grand Preceptor Li Shang patted his waist as he struggled to get up from the ground. Li Yuran quickly came forth to help him up. Both grandfather and grandson looked at one another in the eye and saw the anger evident in them. Grandfather, anyone with good eyes could tell that those men in black from back then belonged to Jun Zhantian. Jun Zhantian kept touting searching assassins as an excuse and threw false charges at others. This action is tantamount to rebelling. Since he could not find any assassins, tomorrow grandfather can get together with a group of officials and heavily step down on him. Li Yuran considered. Jun Zhantian is obviously showing signs of going crazy, mobilizing the military for personal reasons, trespassing into the homes of court officials and searching wantonly. If we could bring about the demise of the Jun family with the destruction of these properties, then that would be quite the acceptable transaction. On the contrary, if grandfather chooses to stay your hand, others might think that you have a guilty conscience. Li Shang frowned and gave a deep sigh. He spoke in a deep voice. Yuran, you are a talented genius, possessing a wisdom that surpasses the masses. Even in the area of strategy, you have proven yourself to be capable of identifying the enemy's weak points. Watching you become the number one amongst the talents of your generation, grandfather have always felt happy about it. However, you also have your weak points. One example would be the area of governance. You are still too young. As such, the things you could see is still limited. Governance. Li Yuran became puzzled. Are you saying that this amount of crime by Jun Zhantian is not enough for His Majesty to take action against the Jun family? Enough. No, it is not. It is far from enough. Li Shang's white eyebrows quivered, the earlier expression of anger and helplessness that he had shown before Jun Zhantian earlier had evaporated. Instead it was replaced with an expression of endless amount of shrewdness. Obviously, the expression he had shown earlier was fake. You still do not understand just how much trust His Majesty have towards Jun Zhantian. For starters, His Majesty's life had been saved by Jun Zhantian at least 6 times or more. Back then, if Jun Zhantian had wanted to rebel or if he had even the slightest bit of secret ambition, then the seat of the emperor would have been his a long time ago. It is true that there can be no love within the royal family. However, one would never truly treat an absolute loyalist as a mortal enemy. This is also the main reason why the Jun family, which has fallen to the point of nearly losing all their successors, could retain so much power over the military. Simply with those few things that happened earlier, did you think it is possible to bring down Jun Zhantian? Li Shang laughed out for a bit. Did you really take Jun Zhantian to be such a brainless person who would offend our Li family to a bloody end? Furthermore, based on his earlier movements, did you think that he had forced us into a road of no return? Li Yuran was a brilliant person. In just moments, he had gained understanding of many of the points spoken. His face changed greatly and he said. Could it be? *TL. The word "in" should mean sinister in this context. However, it could also mean feminine, moon or hidden. Chapter 76, Change. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 076 Change. Sponsored chapter. Sponsored by Sud K, Dubai, Anonymous. A heartfelt gratitude to all the sponsors for your support. Li Shang smiled wryly. Hein. If His Majesty was not behind what happened today, then our Li family would be nothing but a land of corpses by now. Not a single one of us would be left alive. That should have been Jun Zhantian's original intention. If that were not the case, he would not have gone to the extent of mobilizing the army. Somewhere in between, something must have happened to change his mind. As for the one who could cause Jun Zhantian to change his mind, there is only one such person in all of Tianxiang, the emperor. Oh, there is another. His grandson, Jun Moxi. Earlier, you told me that the debauchee had already died. It seems that may not be the case. If Jun Moxi had truly died, then even His Majesty may not be capable of holding Jun Zhantian back. Thus, I conclude that Jun Moxi should still be alive. In addition, Jun Zhantian should have only received this information just now. Thus, Jun Zhantian actually had very little influence about everything that had happened today. Even though we seem to have fallen into misfortune for no reason today, I believe there would be others far worse off when compared to us. Li Shang laughed. The assassination attempt on the imperial princess has provoked His Majesty. Thus, His Majesty has decided to make use of Jun Zhantian's anger to rearrange the power base of the three princes. All the families or officials that had chosen to side with the princes would receive a warning tonight. Some would even be exiled or harshly dealt with. As for those within the imperial palace, the rearrangement has probably been finished by now. A pity, all our preparations. Jun Zhantian going mad today was unexpected, but it was also an inevitable occurrence. If we had grasped onto Jun Moxie back then, this old man would probably have gone mad a long time ago. Thus, His Majesty decided to take advantage of Jun Zhantian's act of madness to. His Majesty would take this opportunity to weaken the Jun family's military power, and then suppress the powers of the other big families like ours before suppressing this incident. The mastermind behind Jun Zhantian is none other than the Emperor himself. The Emperor is also the one with the most understanding of what had happened tonight. So then, do you think we could do anything to that old Jun? Li Yuran felt somewhat shocked. He could never have imagined that his grandfather's mind had already seen so far ahead. He had even clearly understood the thought process of those involved, especially the thoughts of the one standing upon the highest position within Tianxiang Kingdom. His Majesty, the Emperor, is a man of great talent. It is only natural that he does not wish for his successor to be an incompetent person. Thus, His Majesty allowed the three princes to compete. However, His Majesty also does not wish for matters to escalate beyond control. That is why once the three princes' actions went overboard, His Majesty would clear the board and restart everything again for them. This is the biggest reason why the great families with true power within the city would never join the struggle between the princes. Remember, let go of everything that had happened today. Until the situation had stabilized, never take action. Just look there, Li Shang pointed at the heavy amount of smoke billowing up into the skies. All those who chose to take actions in advance have all been sent on their merry way to heaven. If that is the case, does that mean that we will have to do nothing after everything that had happened today? Li Yuran asked. How can we simply do nothing? Even if we want to, His Majesty would not want to, Li Shang smiled craftily. That is why we must still lodge a complaint tomorrow. Only with that would His Majesty have a reason to suppress the great families, which is His Majesty's true intention. If we do not go along, we would be in trouble in the future. Li Yuran entered a state of deep contemplation. He is a smart person, a genius in both civil and military affairs. However, listening to those words, he came to realize just how lacking he was in the understanding of political affairs. Gently stroking the part of his face that was slapped by Jun Zhantian, his eyes flashed with a chilling glint, just like that of a poisonous snake. L.RG Jun Zhantian, I will never forget this slap of yours. TL. Li Yuran will remember this. Meanwhile, the Meng residence was currently having their dogs jump and chickens fly. When compared with the Li family, the Meng family had it far worse. Their homes had been searched to the point of being demolished. And yet, Jun Zhantian felt only depression within him. Because this was not what he had intended to do, nor was this the results he had intended to achieve. After this incident, the capital will turn calm for a long period of time. At least, that was how it would appear externally. Since His Majesty had said that Moxie is still alive, then this senior will become a spear for His Majesty. Doing so is quite worthwhile, although the ending is somewhat anticlimactic. This senior's original intention was to kill off all these people. Although a large number of them had been finished off, the most important ones could not be killed. At this moment, a hasty sound suddenly rang out. Jun Zhantian, you ignorant old man. Stop it. Jun Zhantian's body suddenly shook, as though he could not believe what his ears was hearing. Slowly, he turned around, his eyes staring straight, his face revealed a mad look of joy. A thin, withered-looking old man appeared, his arms carrying someone to his chest. The old man shot out and appeared before Jun Zhantian, panting and sweating profusely. However, Jun Zhantian paid him no attention. He quickly dismounted off his horse and rushed towards the thin old man. Jun Zhantian retrieved the person being held close to the thin old man's chest and spoke in a trembling voice. Moxie. Coincidentally, these two people returned just as everything was about to be wrapped up. Jun Zhantian's expression of surprise clearly showed that he had just escaped from the clutches of absolute despair. He held on to Jun Xie as though he was holding on to the world's most precious treasure. The deep wrinkles of his face harbored the intense amount of concern he was feeling. This is the ecstatic feeling of finding something that one had thought to be lost forever. His fingers trembled in concert with his body while his eyes had turned red from excitement. Watching all this, Jun Xie felt his heart shaking. This is a commander of 1,000,000 soldiers, a resilient iron-blooded man who had returned victorious after hundreds of battles. But, seeing his own grandson alive at this moment made him surprised, his bearing suddenly transformed into that of a frail and ailing elderly person. This is an emotion born deep within a person's flesh and blood. At this moment, Jun Xie felt something well up from the bottom of his heart. It was a feeling, an aching feeling that gave him a sense of warmth and comfort. In addition, he felt his nose turning sour. Jun Xie suddenly felt that it had become hard to breathe, his nose had seemingly stopped working, a feeling which made him feel a desire to cry out. Is this the affection that he had once desired in his dreams? In both past and present, is there any who had shown so much care for him? In both past and present, is there any who would mobilize the armies of an entire country for his sake? In both past and present, who could throw away all their concerns for his sake? Who would have fallen into absolute despair for his sake? Who could become so happy to the point of insanity for his sake? Who could disregard their own reputation, lives and family? For his sake. Watching the old man before him, Jun Xie had no doubt that for his sake, this old man would even pierce a hole through the skies. Because he is his only hope. The only thing he could hold on to. Beside, Jun Wui's crippled body had at an unknown moment descended from his horse, sitting upon the cold ground. Looking at Jun Xie, he was filled with surprise, happiness and satisfaction. His pair of tiger-like eyes had unknowingly turned teary. He secretly turned his head, allowing the tears to drop down before turning back, a smile etched on his face. This is my family. Am I to resist all this? No. At this moment, Jun Xie had suddenly accepted his identity, accepted his family. Regardless of ideals or mindset, he had accepted this world. For the sake of this old man before me, and this family. From today onwards, I am Jun.mo.xie. I am a member of the Jun family. Tianxiang Kingdom, Tianxiang City, Jun family, this is my family. Jun Zhantian's tears almost exploded with excitement. Even though his grandson seemed grievously injured, he remained alive. In addition, a closer inspection showed that his condition was not as serious as he had been told. Thank the heavens. As long as he is alive, everything will be all right. Everything will be all right. Having become so overjoyed, this old man's eyes became moist, his body trembling and swaying unsteadily. Tonight has been a trying one. Chapter 77, Turmoil in the Imperial Court. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 077, Turmoil in the Imperial Court. On the next day, the Imperial Court was filled with disputes from various groups. The scene was no different than a bunch of merchants and farmers arguing at the marketplace. After the ritualistic greeting towards His Majesty, the atmosphere turned silent. Just like the calm before the storm. Before His Majesty was a pile of petitions calling for the impeachment of Jun Zhantian. His Majesty observed the imperial court and was surprised to see the numerous number of vacant positions. Even though he had already expected it, this result had greatly exceeded his expectations. Isn't this a little too much? Even though he had already received the report last night, whereupon he had become enraged, that was simply a report with the names written on it. However, His Majesty was now looking at the results with his own eyes. A good chunk of the imperial court members had disappeared. His Majesty was unable to get accustomed to it. If one were to compare, this would be like a classroom with 100 students. If someone were to receive the news in the middle of the night that 30 of those students had either transferred or dropped out, that person would not feel much. However, when that person sees the empty space within the classroom. This comparison was probably not a bad way of describing what had happened to Tianxiang Kingdom's imperial court. Yesterday night, after the imperial princess suffered from an assassination attempt, Grandpa Jun took action, issuing a declaration that a calamity had occurred. Within Tianxiang City, flames started rising rampantly and people were murdered everywhere. More than 10 high-ranking members of the imperial court ended up being decapitated. In addition, many among these people were once bitter enemies with the Jun family. Besides that, all those men also shared one other common aspect. These men had all chosen to side with one of the imperial princes. However, this common aspect was something that everyone had chosen to keep within their hearts. At this point in time, blurting that out would be no different than courting death. Among the victims of last night's incident, there were 12 who had the qualifications to stand here today. Coincidentally, they were separated into 4s divided equally amongst the 3 princes. Amongst them was an assistant minister of justice, 2 assistant minister of personnel, 3 from the minister of rights, 1 from the minister of state revenue, 3 imperial censors and 2 scholars. This was only those that could be seen here. As for those who could not appear today, how many was there? These people who had come together were those who had constantly opposed the rough members of the imperial court and had been badly hurt during the kingdom's present crisis. However, within the mind of a certain highly positioned individual, this was simply part of his plans. Even though last night, he himself had been angered to the point of having his eyes turn blue. As for those ministers with sharp eyes and powerful retentive memory, they realized something. Today, there was an increase in new faces within the imperial palace. As for those familiar faces, most of them had disappeared. One such example was the captain of the armed guards, Murong Qianjun. He was a talent whose promotion speed was considered rare, at times getting promoted 3 times in a day. However, this rising star of the Murong family had at this point in time disappeared to who knows where. It would appear that the carnage within the imperial palace was no less bloody compared to the outside. A high number of people became nervous. What happened last night? Why did the number of people become so little today? Who can tell me? His Majesty was indeed a master amongst masters in political affairs. Blinking his eyes, he used the peripheral side of his eyes to stare at Jun Zhantian who was dozing off. Senior Duke Jun was truly feeling sleepy thanks to yesterday's events. This was obvious just by looking at his face. Otherwise, he would not have dozed off in the imperial court, he had even nearly started snoring. His Majesty's act of pretending to not know what had happened was the opening act for the imperial court members to begin their barrage of accusations. Within the imperial hall, a large number of people went down on their knees. Your Majesty, we beg you to administer justice for us. A huge number of ministers spoke out with tears flowing down their eyes, their faces showing grief-stricken expressions as they kowtowed vigorously. Dear ministers, if you have anything to say, just say it out in detail. Rise up and tell me all about it. The emperor frowned, a puzzled look was etched on his face. Once His Majesty finished his sentence, tens of ministers all turned on Senior Duke Jun Zhantian. They started their barrage of accusations. Even though he is someone who had accomplished great merit for the kingdom, he disregarded military laws of the kingdom. He mobilized the kingdom's military forces for personal reasons. He disdained the laws of the kingdom. He viewed the powers of the imperial family with contempt. He had acted with wanton abandon. He trespassed the residences of ministers. He allowed his subordinates to wreak havoc and act lawlessly. There were even some heavyweight accusations. He had amassed his own personal army. He has the intention of rebelling. In short, there were innumerable accusations aimed at him, all supposedly backed with conclusive evidence. Later on, the accusations escalated to an even greater level, where it was recommended that Jun Zhantian be dismissed and his entire family decapitated, going so far as exterminating his 9 kindred. In just a brief moment, the atmosphere of the imperial court had become intense. Everyone's face were flushed red, each and every one of them were filled with indignation. In the end they all chorused out. Not killing Jun Zhantian equals endangering the imperial family's powers. Not killing Jun Zhantian, the people would not be appeased. Jun Zhantian turned his gaze up, his eyes slightly closed. Watching the performance by all the ministers in the imperial court, he could only think of his grievously injured grandson. He was contemplating on how to ask His Majesty to loan him the best imperial doctor. Jun Zhantian. You old thing, you actually dare to act in such a brazen manner. What do you have to say for yourself? His Majesty questioned him in a very harsh tone, seemingly furious. Your Majesty, yesterday, this minister received news that the princess had suffered from an assassination attempt just outside the imperial palace. Thankfully, the princess' luck was good and she managed to escape unscathed. However, hearing that those criminals dared to act so wild, going so far as to profane the dignity of the imperial family, this old minister felt a bottomless anger spout out from within my heart. This minister then received further news that the assassins may harbor the intention of following up by trying to assassinate the members of the imperial family and high-ranking officials of the imperial court. This old minister fears that any delay would bring about irreparable disaster. Thus, this old minister had mobilized the army before reporting to Your Majesty, all for the sake of capturing the assassins. In this regard, this old minister had indeed committed a mistake. This old minister begs for Your Majesty's careful inquiry and just punishment. The emperor's mouth was about to lash out, but had forcibly held himself back. You old brat. You have already said everything in detail, what else do I have to inquire? Inquire my ass. You portrayed yourself in such a righteous light, punishing you would make me a muddle-headed ruler. How am I supposed to continue this act? Continue speaking, His Majesty, the Emperor frowned, seemingly unpleased. His Majesty was truly at a loss on how to continue from there. Yes. This old minister felt worried about this matter and did not have the time to inform Your Majesty. This old minister got up in the middle of the night and rushed to the military field without having the time to finish dressing. However, even though the mobilization of soldiers was executed quickly, we were helpless to stop the assassins. Those assassins had come prepared and had instantly turned the city upside down. This old minister exerted every last drop of effort without reserve and served as vanguard to wage a bloody battle against the many insidious assassins. After a long time, we finally managed to curb this disaster and finished off those assassins. The total number of these assassins amount to a whopping hundreds. Their bodies were then hanged for public display before the city gates. However, this old minister dared not claim credit for these actions because there were some regrettable events. Even though this old minister had tried my best, there were tens of officials whom this minister failed to reach in time, resulting in them being brutally murdered by the assassins. Their horrible deaths were all due to this old minister's carelessness and slow response to this situation. This old minister is willing to accept the punishment for my crime of carelessness in executing my duties. Grandpa Jun sighed, his voice mournful. All those lives are the pillars of our Tianxiang kingdom. He rubbed his eyes, appearing to be on the verge of crying. In truth, he was feeling sleepy. All the ministers within the imperial court heard Senior Duke Jun's words and turned to face one another. What? You are willing to accept punishment for your crime? Accept your mother's head. Listening to you, you are simply the great hero that has single-handedly saved all of Tianxiang kingdom. Acting decisively, turning the situation around in a matter of moments, the one who carried a heavy burden to save the common people, the loyal minister who placed the importance of protecting the dignity of the imperial family before all else. Since you have put it that way, not giving you a great amount of reward would be tantamount to a huge loss of reputation, and yet you say you are willing to accept punishment. Besides, is there anyone here who does not know that those men in black are part of the June family? Assassins. What a joke. How does one describe the act of reversing black and white? This is how. We have seen shameless, but we have never seen such a high level of shamelessness before. Turning the act of raiding other people's residence into a meritorious deed, this level of bullshitting expertise had reached a completely new realm. A mountain worth revering star. As for those dead men that were left hanging for display to the public, if the prison chief of the Minister of Justice were to go check it out, he would certainly find that their faces were very familiar. Because those people were simply a bunch of death row prisoners. However, their execution date was bumped up by you, Grand Marshal June. TL.use until like Thaddeowenwheeler, *TL. Almost forgot, equals, a mountain worth revering. A praise meant to celebrate a person's professional manner and conduct. It also leaves one with the desire to model themselves after said person, L.C. Chapter 78, Dugu Zongheng. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 078 Dugu Zongheng. A look of contempt burst out from the faces of all the ministers and they prepared to start their verbal attacks once again. Truth be told, Grandpa June's explanation and justifications were simply unbearable and too easy to refute. After all, Grandpa June was first and foremost a general. His skills in civil affairs was simply too limited. For him to actually be able to come up with an explanation was already a rare occurrence. Asking for a detailed and seamless explanation was absolutely ridiculous. Unexpectedly, an old man with white hair and beard stepped forward. This old man possessed a stalwart figure. Standing beside June Zhantien, it seemed as though there were two majestic mountains imposing their grand aura within the imperial court. His mustache spread out explosively to the side cheeks and beard. A wild-looking face and a loutish body. This was none other than Grandfather Dugu, the second most powerful person within the military in Tianxiang Kingdom, and the #1 predator within the capital city. Dugu Zongheng. He is the #1 savage individual in Tianxiang Kingdom. The #1 unreasonable individual. The #1 tough shank. The #1 great family. Great family's housemaster star. This man has a skin so thick he could be revered as a master in skin thickness. This is a character who would brandish his ignorance as knowledge. This is a character who would talk about large swords when discussing reasons. All the members of the imperial court, be they from the civil or military affairs, showed some degree of fear towards him. Even the present emperor had no way of dealing with him. It was only after he stepped forward did the members of the imperial court realize his existence. They could not help but whisper to themselves. This old man had not attended the court for years now. Why did he suddenly appear today? For him to appear at such a sensitive moment, something is obviously not right. Dugu Zongheng's round eyes widened, just like a mountain bear. He then cupped his hands and spoke in a coarse voice. Your Majesty, the assassination attempt on the imperial princess and the officials of the imperial court is indeed a national situation that could cripple the foundations of our kingdom. Thankfully, this old bag. Senior Duke June Zhantien was quick and decisive in his actions, thus succeeding in averting this terrible disaster. This old one thinks that Senior June's actions this time is not a mistake. He is not only innocent, he has also earned himself a merit. An astounding amount of merit. A thin old man with sheep-like beard who was standing beside him sneered. After this traitor defied the authority of the ministers and disrupted the imperial court's affairs, he is lauded as someone who earned himself a merit. If this is how the imperial court works, then won't we end up being despised by the people of the world? This thin old man with barely any flesh on his body and a sheep-like beard is one of the three most capable individuals from the Meng family, Meng Yufang. Last night, his house suffered the highest level of damage. Not even a single tile was left whole. A high-ranking member of the imperial court had to bring his own family out into the rich and bustling capital in the middle of the night to eat the cold air and sleep under the starry skies of the night. The amount of suffocation he felt nearly caused him to puke out blood. Watching these two military leaders reversing black and white, he was unable to hold it in and stepped forward. Dugu Zongheng became enraged. He turned around and viciously stared at Meng Yufang, opening his mouth that revealed a yellow set of teeth. His voice shook the tiles in the imperial court. Screw your granny. You are worth less than dog poop. You mean to say that this senior is wrong? As if acting in concert with his fury, his beard exploded out, his facial hairs standing upright. His mouth was opened wide, as though he wanted to swallow the thin old man with sheep-like beard, his entire being radiating an aura of violence. Beside him, the great General Dugu Wudi immediately stepped forward to support. Meng Yufang, what are you trying to do? My father is in the middle of a conversation with His Majesty. Do you think someone like you have the qualifications to interrupt them? His hands extended outwards, his palm opened wide like a palm leaf, intent on catching him by his neck. All the senior ministers rolled their eyes. This pair of father and son is truly invincible, Wudi. They actually dared to bully others in the presence of His Majesty. His Majesty, the Emperor who was supposed to be the main character of this play, could not help but stare in a dumbfounded manner. Enough. His Majesty, the Emperor thundered loudly and stood up in fury. A group of civil and military ministers arguing with one another, and starting a fight upon the imperial court. What do you plan to do next? Are you going to start throwing obscenities around? His Majesty's wrath caused everyone to become silent, except the old masters from the Jun family, Dugu family, Li family, Meng family, Song family, Tang family and Murong family. As for the rest, they all immediately knelt down and spoke out in unison. This minister is guilty, I am willing to accept your Majesty's punishment. Very well, I have already understood the gist of what happened. Jun Zhantian had originally wanted to capture assassins, but had made errors in his mobilization of the army. His actions caused the city to fall into chaos. As punishment, 1 year's worth of salary will be deducted. In addition, I decree that you are not allowed to leave your residence for 3 months. However, in light of your contribution of capturing assassins, I reward you 1,000 gold liangs and 1,000-year-old ginseng. Military matters will temporarily be handed over for Dugu Zongheng to handle. Next, you great families chose to ignore the truth and focused only on your own losses, blatantly accusing other ministers. All your positions are now downgraded by 1 rank. In order to avoid riots from happening, all military authority of the great families must be returned to the military division. It will be reassigned again 1 year later. Deducting 1 year's worth of salary, not allowed to leave home for 3 months, a reward of 1,000 gold liangs, 1,000-year-old ginseng. Could this still be considered a punishment towards Old Master Jun? This is simply a reward plus holidays. There was also that military matters will temporarily be handed over for Dugu Zongheng to handle. This sentence seemed to be hiding a different meaning. However, there was a problem here. All the ministers turned to look at the Dugu family's pair of tough shanks. They all had the same thought. If this is how it is to end, won't it be better to have Jun Zhantian continue handling military matters? These pair of father and son from the Dugu family is even worse than Jun Zhantian. At the very least, Old Master Jun is generally a reasonable person. However, this pair of father and son had never been reasonable before. Now that their family's private forces was about to fall into their hands, they wonder how many could come back. In just a moment's time, nearly everyone started cursing secretly and almost lashed out at Meng Yufang. His Majesty was manipulating everything behind the scenes. Since Dugu Zongheng had already appeared, why did you have to step in and interfere? You do not recognize your own strength and weakness, however, don't you at least understand the meaning of the word humiliation? If you want to jump down the cliff, you should just jump down alone. Why the heck did you drag us down with you? What kind of damaged goods are you? Almost everyone in the imperial court revealed an expression of one who had just lost their soul and vigor. It does not matter if it was real or fake. What was important was that it looked real on the surface. As a member of the imperial court, they must have the ability to put on an act. Otherwise, it would be hard for them to continue serving for long. However, there were around 10 or so people within the imperial court who lowered their heads, anger etched upon their faces. These were all men who could not stomach their grievances, they were truly enraged and were unwilling to simply let it go. However, all of them have had their identities noted down by all the senior grandfathers of the imperial court. They could not even recognize that a performance is in progress, these people have no future in store for them. When we go home later, we must inform our sons and grandsons to keep a distance from these people. Otherwise, who knows when we would end up being dragged down by them. You fellow ministers are all the pillars of our kingdom. To see such a scene occurring in this imperial court today. I am disappointed. Very disappointed. His Majesty was furious, unstoppably furious. After having meted out the punishments, His Majesty said heavily. This matter will be resolved following my commands. No one is allowed to disobey it. You may leave now. The Minister of Rights, Sun Chingha**** shouted out loudly. Your Majesty, please stay. This person was none other than Fatty Tang's future father. Lol. All the senior grandpas of the imperial court burst out with a look of contempt. Could you not see that His Majesty is heading back to his chambers to relish the joy from earlier? Ever resourceful, overlooking the world as its sovereign, delightfully manipulating everyone within the palm of his hand, suppressing all the great family's influence and authority in one fell swoop, bringing stability to the entire capital city. How joyful would such an experience be? However, you actually chose this moment to restrain His Majesty. Do you not want to live a good life anymore? What a silly idiot. What do you wish to discuss? His Majesty's face was a mask of fury. His Majesty's fury had originally been staged, but after having been restrained his false countenance of fury has started turning real. Your Majesty, please understand, this one is in charge of ceremonies. However, today is the day for the annual Gifted Scholars Autumn Festival Feast. What should I do? This Minister of Rights is clearly missing the capacity to judge the situation. This is not a light problem. All the ministers in the imperial court sighed inwardly. Could you not see what kind of situation we have here? Every family is filled with weeping and mourning, who would be in the mood to care about a Gifted Scholars Autumn Festival Feast. This brat is simply an idiot. I will need to pay attention next time. I must not get too close to him, chances are he will be the death of me. Sure enough, His Majesty was greatly furious and spoke out in a heavy tone. Gifted Scholars Autumn Festival Feast. We are currently in the middle of troubling times, how can you even bring this up? If I recall correctly, I had appointed 2 ministers to be in charge of organizing the Gifted Scholars Autumn Festival Feast just a few days ago. But these 2 men are amongst the names of those who've been assassinated by the assassins. Having finished speaking, he pointed vigorously at the list of names on his table. Flicking his sleeves, His Majesty walked out with an expression of rage on his face. No one was able to see it, but when His Majesty had turned away, the sides of his lips curled, as though he was happy. Indeed, no one was able to see it. However, all the old ministers were secretly feeling pleased with themselves as well. As expected, everything went according to my predictions. After His Majesty had left, everyone patted their knees and got up from their kneeling position. A few of the elder ministers looked at one another with an as expected gaze. Li Shang snorted and looked at Jun Zhantian through the corner of his eyes. Old Jun, congratulations. Has your grandson gotten better yet? The reason Li Shang had mentioned this matter to Jun Zhantian was for the sake of pissing him off. Even if Li Shang could not do anything to him this time, he could still prod Jun Zhantian until he chokes. That would not be too bad. However, once Jun Zhantian heard that, he suddenly recalled what he wanted to do. Ignoring Li Shang, he immediately ran in the direction that His Majesty had went. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. I need to borrow that death-warding imperial doctor for a while, this is an emergency. All the ministers in the imperial court stumbled. TL. Dugu Zongheng is not the housemaster of the number one great family, he is the number one housemaster amongst the great families. A bit confusing. TL. In the earlier chapters, the author had Sun Qinghe take the role of Vice Minister of Ministry of Justice. However, in this chapter, he is now the Minister of Rights. Apparently, Sun Qinghe is a multitasker. TL. Tough shank is used for /guandaoro, which means a person who is hard to deal with. By the way, I am not Japanese. In fact, my grandparents had to live under Japanese occupation. If they are still alive, I doubt they will have anything good to say about Japan. Chapter 79, A Blessing in Disguise. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 079, A Blessing in Disguise. Dugu Zongheng squinted his eyes as he looked on with contempt. Look at this old bastard. Just because his grandson was a little hurt, he became so anxious. He does not have the bearing of a great general at all, how disdainful. For someone like me to be outranked by such an ordinary man, what a worldly tragedy. Dugu Wudi curled the corners of his lips and spoke out in support of his father while nodding his head. Indeed, how despicable, a worldly tragedy. All the ministers shook their heads in unison as they looked at them with utter contempt. A mere scratch would have been enough to cause you people from the Dugu family to raise a sky-shaking havoc. And yet you actually have the gall to despise Jun Zhantian, how shameless. However, the words that Grandfather Dugu spoke today seemed rehearsed. It seemed one of the head clerks must have helped him out with the script. Could it be that he had rehearsed this for a long time? That is a shocking revelation. Could it be that something is going on in the military division? Thinking about this, all the old foxes in the imperial court felt shocked. Seeing his son supporting him with complimenting words, Dugu Zongheng laughed happily. Stroking his beard, he said. In the end, my family is still the best. Producing nearly 10 heirs in one go, each of them are skilled dragons and fearsome tigers, unlike the Jun family which only have a single fur. Dugu Wudi nodded like a chicken pecking down at grains of rice. Indeed, BDNV. A wave of contempt burst out from the crowd again. With just one sentence, you started bragging about your family foundation. Producing nearly 10 heirs in one go. Do you take that daughter-in-laws of yours as sows? How unrefined. Besides, your 3 sons have a total of 20 wives but only nearly 10 grandchildren, you think you are qualified to brag about this. Ignoring the prideful pair of father and son, they all shook their heads and left as they headed home. Let us just assume that everything that had happened in these 2 days as an exhilarating farce. If only we knew it would end like this. Sigh. A while later, the palace guards saw Grandpa Jun triumphantly escorting an old man with white hair and beard who was carrying a medical chest out the palace. On the horse that Grandpa Jun rode on, there was actually another seat prepared. It turned out that even before entering the palace, Grandpa Jun had already prepared a seat for the doctor. Truly. A detailed plan. What kind of person could be called a master? This is what you call a master. The great young master Jun Moxie was lying in bed, putting in every effort to appear ill. But in truth, he was inwardly feeling joyful. The Lolita, little cook carefully served him, scooping spoonful of sweet bird's nest soup for him. There were also ginseng soup, 8 treasures lotus soup. As long as it is nourishing, it would be prepared for him. The only thing which made him unhappy was that Grandpa Jun would occasionally prepare a generous sum of 6th level Xian beast's blood. According to him, this was a rare nourishing stuff. But, Jun Moxie would have to cover his nose and pour it down his throat or pour it down the bucket beside his bed. It is simply too hard to stomach. I am not a barbarian. Is it worth it to give me blood to drink? How unhygienic is it? Would my stomach even survive? Naturally, these were not what had made him joyful. After having suffered from this injury, Jun Moxie realized that the Hongjun Pagoda within his consciousness was constantly rotating at high speed, releasing a rich amount of white, misty spiritual qi. The qi swept through his body's meridians again and again, focusing onto the damaged area. In less than a day, the sword wound on his chest had been fully healed. After several coughs, some thick black-colored blood came out. The damaged area on his chest had also been reduced considerably. As for the wound on his thigh where one could see through to the other side, it only seemed serious. After the continued restoration effects of the spiritual qi, he was no longer in pain from the wound. The only thing that gave Jun Moxie some discomfort was the waves of itchiness and numbness, which occurred every now and again. However, Jun Moxie still felt comfortable. After all, there is the saying, no pain, no gain. That was not all. The Hongjun Pagoda's spiritual qi kept gushing forth as though saying that it would not stop until the wounds on Jun Moxie's body have disappeared. Naturally, Jun Moxie would not miss out on such a good opportunity to cultivate his arts. He quickly activated the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, leading the near-solid form of spiritual qi as he channeled them through his meridians. While he was exercising the arts, he realized something different this time. The spiritual qi turned into a semi-solid existence as it pummeled the area of the meridians that were suffering from blockages due to the sword wound. Almost instantly, the blockage was burst open. After that, he could clearly feel the qi flow within his meridians expanding bit by bit, becoming thicker bit by bit. Under such circumstances, the Hongjun Pagoda would usually stop releasing the spiritual qi. At this moment however, it did not show any signs of stopping at all. Jun Moxie became elated. He gave up on his plans to restore the damage from the sword wound and focused obsessively on leading the spiritual qi in order to increase his qi flow, secretly becoming joyful over this fortunate event. Jun Moxie suddenly felt that his behavior was similar to those of scammers. Others were being kind to help you treat your injuries, and yet you took advantage of this opportunity to increase your own strength. This was just like the act of making profit from other people's kindness. However, such a type of scam, I would very much like to commit a few more. I am already addicted to it. Who would not want to do this kind of fraud? Jun Moxie cried out inwardly as he grasped onto the opportunity provided by this scam. Otherwise, what would he do when the spiritual qi's intensity dropped down to its former level after his wounds were fully healed? He has now become accustomed to this high-quality delivery service of spiritual qi. Once his body has been fully restored, he could only cry. Or perhaps I should stab myself again in order to gain such a suitable condition for cultivation. Unfortunately, some of the spiritual qi would still move towards the wounded areas and slowly began restoring those parts. During the moments when the wound on his thigh was being restored, the feeling of itchiness started to appear as well. The emission speed of spiritual qi from the Hongjun Pagoda began slowing down. After a few more moments, the speed of its rotation also slowed down and finally returned to its former state of silence within his sea of consciousness. Jun Moxie woke up with a start and gave a sigh within his heart. I still have not had enough. This fast rate of cultivation is simply too alluring. Activating his inner eye, he could see a transparent qi flow slowly moving through his meridians. In the short span of just one night, the size of this qi flow had doubled. If one were to use the Xian qi cultivation as a standard of measure, then his current level of strength was at least at the 8th level Xian qi. In addition, his qi had a high grade of purity. In this world where 9 and below are but ants, silver and gold Xian experts were aplenty. No matter how pure his 8th level Xian qi may be, he was still not someone worth discussing. However, do not make light of Jun Moxie's speed of cultivation. Just in case anyone had forgotten, he had only arrived into this world roughly a month ago. Within this 1 month's time, he successfully improved his body, which was only at the 3rd level Xian Qi up to the 8th level Xian Qi. If those old supreme divine Xian geezers witnessed this practice speed, they would be shocked to the point of having their old teeth drop out. If this world has an institute of anatomy where they dissect things in their studies, then upon learning of Jun Moxie's speed of cultivation, they would likely move out to capture him and dissect him for studying purposes. Jun Moxie gave a pleasant sigh of relief. He suddenly felt that the injury caused by the sword was too bloody darned worth it. He had begun to seriously consider if he should just stab himself again. A bodyguard entered and reported. Young Master Tang is here to visit you. Jun Moxie gave an "oh," then he suddenly remembered something. He calmly picked up something that was wrapped up with a cloth beside his pillow and stuffed it into his blanket. Then, he used a feeble voice to speak. Invite young Master Tang in. Following that, the sounds of heavy footsteps could be heard. Fatty Tang panted as he stepped into Jun Moxie's room, his face expressing exertions. At the same time, the vast room suddenly seemed much smaller. Third young master, you scared me. Tang Yuan's face was a mask of shock. I heard that you were killed and cried for the whole night. If we brothers were to be forced to part ways forever, then how am I supposed to live? Jun Moxie stared weakly at the fatty before him. He had the urge to jump out and kick him out. However, he was currently playing the part of a heavily injured person. He will have to spare him for now. His eyes on the other hand was spouting flames. Chapter 80, Gifts from Fatty. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 080 Gifts from Fatty. Thankfully, you did not die. Otherwise, I would be left alone. What would I ever do without you? Fatty Tang wiped away his tears. After that, he drank a cup of tea that little Ku brought in and called out. Come. Quickly lift up and bring over the gifts that my Tang family has prepared for third young Master Jun. Jun Moxie turned his attention to the outside. He was curious as to what kind of gifts did this brother of his prepared. He had even used the word lift for the gifts. What kind of gifts could it be? Two men carried in 2 big boxes into the room, their faces showing an expression of extreme difficulty. Suddenly, Jun Moxie's bedroom was completely occupied by Tang Yuan and the 2 big boxes. Even little Ku did not have any place to be at, she could only try to shrink her legs as she sat on a chair. Tang Yuan waved to have the 2 men move out and laughed. He moved about with a mysterious air as he giggled and glanced at Jun Moxie. After opening the box, he moved away to let Jun Moxie see the contents within. Seeing it, Jun Moxie nearly fainted. Placed within the box were high-grade medicines, boxes after boxes, bottles after bottles, packages after packages. All of them were perfectly packed and the smell of medicine assailed one's nose. One look was enough to confirm that the things inside were all valuable items. Jun Moxie wondered. Did this fatty sweep up all the medical shops within the capital? For the common people that had been injured, these medicines would certainly prove useful. In fact, those medicines were necessary. Moreover, some of these medicines might be impossible to obtain even if one has money. However, there was a problem here. Jun Moxie is no ordinary person, he has absolutely no need for this stuff. In Jun Moxie's eyes, these items were no different from a pile of garbage. At the very least, it was only chicken ribs asterisk. Groaning, Jun Moxie spoke feebly. Fatty, you have had it tough. However, even if I were to get hurt every day, all these medicines could probably last until the day I reach 100 years of age. Are you here to visit me, or to curse me so that I get injured more? Tang Yuan slapped down on the box, closing it and spoke in a triumphant demeanor. Third young master, what do you think of your brother's acquisition techniques? As long as the medicine is available in Tianxiang City, regardless if it is the holy grade or pinnacle grade, all of it is now within these 2 boxes. After saying that, he secretly moved close to June Moxie and whispered furtively. Third young master, those in the bottom layer are the ones I have spent a huge amount of effort in acquiring. Those are all rare items that are very hard to find. You must hide them carefully. What is it? June Moxie felt himself becoming interested, his eyebrows were raised as he asked. Tang Yuan gave a furtive glance at little Ko and then smiled indecently before replying. The ones at the bottom are those that you are most interested in: treasures to make females strong, joy song grass, kinky lady, chaste breaker, golden spirit spear, infallible rod, wall piercer, 100 gene hoist. Stop. Stop, stop, stop. June Moxie was shocked. What in the world are all those weird stuffs? What is that? 100 gene hoist, just what is that? 100 gene hoist, he he he. Tang Yuan let out an obscene smile again. Pointing at June Moxie's crotch, he whispered. It means that after you eat that item, then that part of you could hoist up 100 gene, 60.5 kilograms. Good stuff. Hearing June Moxie use the words stuff, Tang Yuan decided to call it stuff as well. Bloody hell. Don't do this to me, that is simply too disgusting. June Moxie felt himself coming down with a headache. Quickly move it away. If my grandfather sees it, he might decide to just cut that part of mine off. I want to take it with me even after I die. Don't bring such a kind of calamity to me. What are you scared of? As long as one is a man, he will certainly appreciate this item. If I am not mistaken, Senior Boss June should also have this item. After all, his age is nothing to scoff at. Without the help of this stuff, even with his glorious bearing, he may not be able. Kaka. Tang Yuan laughed out recklessly. Suddenly. What item do I also have? A deep, profound voice sounded out and Grandpa June stepped into view just outside the doors. A puzzled expression was on his face as he glanced at Tang Yuan before looking at the crammed room. What is going on here? What were you just talking about earlier? Why is my luck so shitty? Tang Yuan was shell-shocked, large drops of sweat perspired out from him, his eyes rolling about in disorder. The floor below his obese body had, in an instant become drenched with a pool of sweat. Oh, my pitiful life. If those words earlier had been heard by old Master June. What is all this stuff? Grandpa June showed an expression of annoyance. What a mess, quickly move it away. Tang Yuan immediately straightened himself, nodding his head like a chicken pecking on grains. Yes, yes. I will immediately take them out. These are all some common herbs and medicine, nothing special about it. After he spoke out though, Grandpa June spoke out again. Fatty, what was the item that you said I have? The facial features on Tang Yuan's face suddenly contorted together, his complexion turning white, then red, then green. His fat cheeks trembled non-stop and his thigh quaked. Fatty was saying something about your imposing aura. He even said that His Majesty's aura could also be felt from you, but decided to stop because the subject was too much of a taboo. June Moxie quickly stepped in to smooth things over. Watching the poor Fatty's pitiful figure, he estimated that Fatty would probably turn to stone from just another word by Grandpa June. What is so taboo about that subject? Do you need to be scared to such heights? This senior simply possesses a grand and imposing aura, a heroic aura that would never fade. This is simply a fact. Grandpa June looked at Tang Yuan with an expression of disdain and continued. In the future, do not invite our Moxie to go to those shady places anymore. Back then, he became bad because he followed you all the time. Ah! Tang Yuan became shocked. Old master, how could you flip right and wrong to such an extent? Back then, I was the one who followed your grandson and turned bad as a result. Grandpa June snorted. In his heart, his own grandson was naturally a good grandson. As for all the disappointing things which happened back then, the main reason would naturally be due to this bad apple of a friend. The two bodyguards came in and lifted up the two boxes. Tang Yuan then urgently said. The second box. Jun Moxie started to sweat himself. Could it be that the items within the second box are even more unbearable than the first? Are you trying to get me killed? Grandpa Jun waved his hand, commanding the men to carry away the two boxes of gifts away. Little Ko also went along with them. It was only then that the two of them let out a sigh of relief. An old man with white hair and beard walked in. His face was one of kindness and harmony. He carried with him a small medical chest. Tang Yuan became shocked. He quickly bowed in a respectful manner and saluted. Sir Fong. This Sir Fong was none other than the chief of the imperial doctors, Fong Huisheng. Those within Tianxiang city also gave him a resounding nickname. Death Warding Fong. The meaning behind this name was that no matter how grievous one's injuries may be, once the imperial Dr. Fong treats that person, then that person will never die. This description towards him may have been exaggerated, however, his expertise within the field of medicine was indeed indisputable. If Huatua *** were to return to life, then he would probably be at this level. In the past, Tang Yuan had fallen seriously ill and all the doctors within the capital were unable to cure him. During the most critical moment, this Sir Fong had appeared to treat him, saving him from the brink of death. Thus, Tang Yuan showed a great level of respect towards Sir Fong. After all, he was the one who saved his life. Fong Huisheng nodded and gave a gentle smile. Without speaking, he sat on the bed and his hands grasped onto Jun Moxie's wrist, feeling the pulse on his wrist. He carefully observed Jun Moxie's complexion, pulling up his eyelids and asking him to extend his tongue out for observation. It was at this moment that an idea suddenly popped into Jun Moxie's mind. Using his internal energies, he exerted control over the qi flow of his body. It suddenly moved, causing his meridians to pulse in a seemingly abnormal manner. This method was something that this world has no knowledge of. Naturally, there was also no one who could detect this method. Fong Huisheng's face gradually turned serious. He had originally assumed that Jun Zhantian was simply making a mountain out of a molehill by dragging him here. However, after having checked this patient's pulse, he suddenly realized that this youngster before him was in a truly terrible state. There is a part of chicken ribs which is tasteless. Meaning, eating it would be pointless, throwing it away would be a waste. Huatua is a famed doctor in ancient China during the Three Kingdoms era.